Shocking.
I think we're live again. Maybe this time it'll be kinder to us.
I don't know. We shall see.
Sorry about that. We had some technical difficulty, so we're just going to do a part 2 video here, and we'll just pick up where we left off. We're talking about the debt ceiling deal being passed and what that means moving forward. I think that essentially it's more of the same. The question is now, what does this mean that they've passed the debt ceiling deal? Well, the first thing they have to do is the Treasury has to refill their coffers. And how do they do that? They do that by issuing bonds or creating debt. All right. So now the question is, what kind of debt are they going to try to sell to the market? All right. We've talked about this before. Is that and there's a great article that's pretty in depth. And Arthur Hayes is a crypto guy. You should definitely check it out. This is pretty dense. But basically, what he talks about in here is what is the appetite for debt in the market, okay, and who are the buyers, and it used to be, foreign individuals, institutions, banks, and some of that's still true, but the issue is, are they going to issue short-term debt or long-term debt? And the answer he gave was that the only thing there appears to be appetite for is short-term debt. And that's, interesting, because are they going to sell 1-year bonds, 2-year bonds, 5-year bonds, 30-year bonds? I don't know that there's a real appetite for 30-year bonds right now. And so that'll be what we have to wait and see what they do next, as it relates to the Treasury refilling their account at the Fed that they use to pay for all the government bills, which is everything from entitlements to, I guess, random government projects that, we all love, like $4 million for study of gay frogs in, the Mississippi Delta region. Whatever they do, I have no idea what these people do, but nothing against gay frogs. It's just seems like a little bit of a waste of money. But that's
Yeah, we don't want to be careful. If you misgender the frogs, you'll set yourself up for litigation.
Our ESG score is going to be dog shit.
Yes.
Let's see here.
We were talking when we were rudely interrupted by Streamlabs crapping out on us. Go back to the national debt clock, if you will, please. I think I had the understandings that if you take the national debt divided by all the citizens in the U.S., you get that 95,000 number. But if you take the same national debt number and divide it by just people who pay taxes every year, meaning there's a portion of the population that participates in the labor force and pays taxes, and then there's everyone else, like children, don't participate in the labor force and they don't earn an income, so they don't pay any taxes necessarily. So if you divide the same number by just the tax-paying contingent, you get that bigger number.
Interesting. That was interesting. That just popped up on the screen. Just went in a way, and it says U.S. Treasury dollars, which is dollars created by the Treasury that don't have any debt or interest on them. That's interesting, right? Because the idea here is that, who do we owe this debt to? Well, it's owed to, if I understand this correctly, it's owed to the Federal Reserve. Is that not right?
If the Federal Reserve buys the T-bills or bonds, then yes. So the Treasury ends up having to pay interest back to the Federal Reserve, but they don't. But see, if the Federal Reserve doesn't owe anyone, they're the, I don't know what's the word I'm looking for?
The Federal Reserve is a private bank. It's not part of the U.S. government.
Yeah, so this is this is such a mind job. When you think about the Federal Reserve can use or they can create dollars to use to buy and hold assets or buy treasury bills or buy corporate bonds or otherwise put money into the system. But then what happens when the treasury needs to, or excuse me, when the Fed, see, this is such a weird thing. You think the Fed has a balance sheet, and they hold assets on the balance sheet like stocks and bonds and other things. And you think about like what some people question the need for the Fed to ever sell any of the assets that it holds, and because it creates the money. Like the it doesn't need. Do you see where I'm going with this? Is that they technically don't need to sell anything to raise money, to raise funds. So you and I, if I want to raise money, I have to sell something. Jerome Powell gets up and talks about this. He's like, well, if the Powell family, makes irresponsible financial decisions, and we get into into financial trouble, then we have to sell some of our assets to raise money. I'm like, yeah, you as an individual, that's true, but the Federal Reserve isn't an individual, and it doesn't play by the same rules. And does that, am I making some sense here? Ideally,
Well, it's a complicated issue, and I think that it's important for people to understand that we're trying to wrap our minds around this too. The way I understand it is very simply put, is that the buyer of this debt may ultimately end up being the Federal Reserve, which is even more mind-bending. But that debt would then go on the Fed's balance sheet. Okay? And at the end of the day, it's complicated for a reason. And again, I would highly recommend you read Arthur Hayes' post here on Twitter, because for me and Ted to go through it, I read it last night. I'll probably read it again. This is one of those things you got to read 4 or 5 times to really get an idea of what's going on. But at the end of the day, basically what he's saying is the Fed and Treasury use interest income paid on various facilities and debt as a new form of money printer. Okay? So he's saying Bitcoin's not going down and the bull market is forming right now. The point of his article here was to say he believes that in the third and fourth quarter of this year, you're going to start to see a resolution of some of this, and it'll come in the form of the fact when the market realizes that they've kind of put themselves in a corner, because what he's saying is interest rates are going to continue to rise. They're going to kind of peak down here in the summer, and then they're going to flare back up, which is something that's happened in the past, right, with interest rates. And that's a whole other topic here. But the main thing is what do we do now? Okay, there's a debt ceiling deal passed. They're going to spend more money. How they raise money for the Treasury is going to be interesting to follow, and we're going to learn too as we watch how this evolves. But his end point was that he believes, and this is just his opinion, and he's one of those guys that I respect. He's one of those guys where most stuff you read on Twitter, after you're done, you get stupider. And I said that on purpose. When you read his stuff, you get smarter. So I think it's important to look at all this stuff. But at the end of the day, yes, try to understand this, but Bitcoin is not going anywhere. You're going to want to own hard assets. They're going to continue to spend money. Nothing's changed is the bottom line of all of this. The debt ceiling passed. That drama's over. Nothing's different. They're continuing to do the same things. We'll see what they do with interest rates. He suggested they would pause in June and then have to start raising again in July. And that nobody knows. Everybody's just speculating, right? So that's the stupid thing about all of this, is that we live in this system where even the smartest people in the system have no idea what's going on. I mean, there might be 10 people, 20 people, I don't know. Let's talk about all those people that rule the world. They probably know exactly what's going on, right? But we don't. We don't know what they're going to do. I mean, you can look at data and, but they might throw a curveball out of left field. Who the hell knows? So the only thing you can do is own hard assets, and Bitcoin is one of those.
Yes, it is. I wanted to also make an analogy or point something out, is that, months back, like earlier in our streaming career, we talked about the debt ceiling was optics, and it was a dog and pony show. It was theatrics, it was drama, and all of those things. I'd rather be happy than right is a good song lyric from some band that I forgot about a long time ago. Point I'm trying to drill into, or the thing I'm trying to just reiterate here, is that in the same way that in The Wizard of Oz, when, spoiler alert, Toto pulls back the curtain and you see the guy pulling the things and all that, you had the big scary head that had everyone's attention, that was being like, oh, I'm the great Wizard of Oz, all the smoke and all of the fireworks and all that, and you see the curtain get pulled back, and it says, "Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Hey, look over here, look over here." This merry-go-round happened again in 2023, just like it happened in previous cycles with previous presidents, with previous iterations and versions of Congress and the makeup of Congress, meaning makeup of the federal government. Like the time is a flat circle, and this debt ceiling debate was as old as time, and this dog and pony show was everything that it needed to be to serve and provide everything that everybody needed to hear at the time they needed to hear it. And I'm not trying to be a jerk or sound like a butthead over here, but I'm not saying that we predicted that this was going to come out a certain way. What we talked about was simply, this is going to be there's a lot of theatrics. They'll wait till the 11th hour. I think it's no accident that they waited until Memorial Day weekend to make it known that they had a deal in principle ahead of a bank holiday, to try and stave off any panic reactions or severe reactions either way in market, like in financial markets, to stave off some of the volatility, so that people that wanted to try and capture some of the moves either to the upside or to the downside weren't going to be able to do that in traditional financial markets. Which let's be very, very specific here. POTUS put out a thing on Twitter about how we reached agreement and we protected the following things, and what was was probably the second line item was entitlements: Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, all of the entitlement stuff that you just do not mess with. If you are in public, as a public figure, you do not trample on entitlements, or your butt is out. Period.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Saying, I don't make
this
the
article
rules.
He talks about the baby boomers, and they're still the largest voting bloc, and it basically says the same thing. Having said all that, I wanted to bring up this tweet too, and this is interesting because here we say the Fed hiked rates aggressively to stop inflation. What was the main cause of inflation? Jerome Powell said it was wage inflation in a hot labor market. Well, the government just admitted their numbers were wrong. And this is just emblematic of how crazy all this is. Okay? In the fourth quarter of 2022, labor productivity in the non-farm business sector was unrevised, retaining the 1.6% increase reported last month. Hourly compensation, however, was revised down from the previously reported increase of 4.9% to a decrease of 0.7%. Okay? So they're making these decisions to raise rates on incorrect numbers.
I mean, is anybody surprised? I mean, this stuff is like, again, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. The next, this is like infuriating to see this stuff, and to see all the chaos and all the havoc that has been wreaked with interest rate policy, banks that have failed, people that have lost money, lost their jobs, and we're just inflation is transitory. And
no, well, the real thing in here is that they are trying to destroy, and when I say destroy, they're trying to destroy demand, and they're using wrong numbers to justify their decisions. This is, I mean, it'd be like if Apple reported numbers that were wrong and you made a decision to buy the stock based off the wrong numbers, and 5 months later they came out and said, Oh yeah, by the way, we said we sold 30 million units. It was actually 3. Sorry. Like it's there's no accountability for this. And like, these numbers get revised all the time, but like they're raising rates at such an aggressive, clip to try to stave this off, and ultimately, no matter what they do, the other thing with their inflation numbers is they don't measure in there the cost of gas, the cost of food, the cost of things people actually need to live. So all
Yeah,
this is manipulated. Frankly, it's all bullshit. All of it is, and people waste hours and time. I mean, we're doing it right now. Like that's why
yeah.
Bitcoin is so much more simpler. And I'm not saying that like Bitcoin needs to be the world reserve currency or all of that. I'm just saying for your own personal well-being, where do you store your labor and your wealth? I would choose to store it in a system that doesn't have all this fugazi, right? That is the inflation projection is known for the next 100 years, right? The supply is known, and so like if I have excess, labor that money that I've earned from labor, U.S. dollars, I'm going to store it in something that has a fixed supply and an inflation schedule that's known for the next 100 years. It seems like holding wealth in U.S. dollars is kind of like a guessing game, right? Here's what they're going to spend, they're going to debase the money, and they're going to do everything they can to justify decisions, but then the information they use to justify their decisions isn't right. And it's like, okay, like enough's enough. Like I'm opting out. I'll use dollars to pay my bills. I'll use dollars to pay taxes. But I do not want to keep my wealth in U.S. dollars. Now you could say, well, Josh, what about T-bills, or what about okay, so the same government that's doing all of this, and if that's what Arthur Hayes was saying. He goes, who wants to give the government a 30-year bond when they know for a fact in 1 year that dollar is going to be worth less anyway, let alone 30 years? So the demand has got to come for short-term treasuries and all this stuff. And forgive us too, because I know that this is confusing, because it's confusing for us, and it's confusing for anybody. I mean, I would say that I have a grasp of maybe 3 or 4 out of 10 on how all this stuff works. And I would say the average person is 0, right? And so there's, if you're interested in this, feel free to reach out, and I can point you in the right direction of some people that truly understand this stuff. But the general picture is just kind of like, what the hell is going on? Like, like, do these guys have any idea what they're doing?
I mean, I wouldn't want I don't want Pal's job. What I want, yeah, well, you, what I want doesn't even matter. I think the point of our discussion today is that we got through the debt ceiling debate. It was a good show. People were seen to be doing things. Seen is the optics were good where they needed to be for the people that needed them to be good. Like Biden was able to pander to Democrats. Some Republicans are pretending to be mad, but the reality is that the system has to keep operating, or else our standard of living gets knocked back, 200 years. And that's not acceptable either. So we're kind of in this weird spot, if you want my opinion. And we just have to, like, the only thing we can do besides bellyache about it is find an alternative to store our purchasing power, try to preserve it. And we know the answer. And, I'm looking forward to digging into this Arthur Hayes thing, because I desperately want to have some idea of just what can we likely expect to happen over the next couple of years. And really, it's just the only thing we can do is position. We're not predicting anything. We're just positioning. That's, at the end of the day.
Yeah, and here's what they're going to do. They're going to spend more money. Like that's it. Like there's no. So just take out to 2025. All right, this for the next 2 years, they're going to spend $4 trillion. That's what you know. I mean, and so, you know, and then you get into the interest on the debt that they have to roll over from 0 interest rates to 5%, and this stuff is just, it's unbelievable. Somebody's going to be left holding the bag when all this blows up. Is the bottom line, and the person holding the bag is those who own U.S. dollars, right? When all this blows up, if you've got 250 grand in a bank or 200 grand in a bank of U.S. dollars, you're the bag holder. That's the problem with all of this. The banks aren't going to be the bag holder. The government's not going to be the bag holder. Politicians aren't. Companies aren't. The U.S. taxpayer is the bag holder in all of this. And by bag holder, I mean you're stuck with something that's worth nothing, right? And so,
or worth a lot less, over time.
Yeah. And so this is all going to be put on to the American taxpayer. Don't get confused about nobody's coming to save you. This tweet is great. The U.S. government's bankrupt and it wants to leave you with the bill. The only way out is to buy hard assets. Bitcoin's one of those. Gold and silver or others, potentially real estate, art, the things we talk about all the time. And you don't have to be a millionaire to do this. Start learning how to take a percentage of what you have in savings, denominated in dollars, and allocate those to hard assets. I mean, that's the takeaway here from all of this is, okay, they passed the debt ceiling bill. Try to figure out what the hell that means. At the end of the day, does anything change with my Bitcoin thesis? Absolutely not. It actually just got stronger. So do nothing is the answer for me, and keep doing what you're doing. Keep accumulating hard assets as best you can, right? You don't have to go out and buy, a strip center or, buy 5 Bitcoin at once. Just start with a little bit. Take $100 and, start buying $100 a week of Bitcoin, because you'd be shocked at what can happen. I've seen it happen over the last 6 years. If you slowly, average in to Bitcoin over time, it's amazing what happens. And so, I don't want to be like a doomsayer and I don't know what's going to happen with all this stuff clearly. Trying to get my head around it, trying to learn with you, Ted, and then, people watching, we're all trying to learn this stuff together. But it is unbelievably complex, and it's complex for a reason. This stuff is high level. The things you worry about now are, and this is serious, the way they get out of this stuff is they go to war. It's not a joke. There's a great book called The Creature from Jekyll Island. All this is designed in a certain way. They've been able to keep the system alive for so long by having perpetual wars. That's why people that are in Bitcoin say, they're anti-war, because the system, the way it's designed today, the only way it continues is perpetual war. And look where we're at. We've got a guy that can't stand up or speak a sentence arming a country that wants to, provoke Russia. And this isn't a comment on Ukraine versus Russia. Truthfully, I don't know enough to speak intelligently about it. All I know is that it seems like if the United States keeps poking the bear here, it's going to be a bad thing in the long run, because the way you look at all this stuff is that if they need a war to continue the system, that's a good explanation of what they're doing in Ukraine. Why are they sending hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayer money to Ukraine? That wasn't even discussed. Why don't we stop sending money to other countries when we're $32 trillion in debt? Well, that's how the system works, right? It's, I don't know. It's really frustrating. It's really frustrating, especially to somebody who, believes in the goodness of humanity, to see these people who are certainly don't have our best interests in heart perpetuate the system that enslaves all humans into this debt-based system. And it's fiat slavery is what it is. You live your whole life chasing imaginary dollars to pay off imaginary debt, to, these people who continually take us to war. I mean, it's just sad.
So in summary, the way to deal with the here and now is to think about acquiring hard assets. It's that simple, in my opinion.
I agree. Yeah, and I mean, apologies for some of the convolutedness here. Like I said, Ted and I are just trying to understand this too, but wanted to give you kind of a overview of what we think is happening. Again, it doesn't change anything. It only makes my I can only speak for myself. My conviction stronger in Bitcoin in the crypto space. I think you're gonna need it. I mean, I think it's gonna be one of those things that preserves your wealth into the future as all this stuff plays out over the next couple months and next couple of years. So, good place to wrap it up. Sorry about the technical difficulties. This was a little bit more confusing than I originally wanted it to be, but I think that's good too, because we'll learn this stuff together as we go through it.
Thanks for the memories.
Any final words, Ted, other than buy hard assets?
Just the world keeps turning, and money is still like the government's still going to be the U.S. government's still going to be the single largest consumer of goods and services in our economy, and there's going to be a lot of FUD in the media. There's going to be another manufactured crisis. It just is what it is, and you have a choice, and you can get swept away by it, or you can get a little bit smarter and figure out how to acquire and hold hard assets to help deal with monetary debasement. That's the end of the day. Hard assets are how you deal with the monetary debasement that's going to continue and has been going on for a long time. And that's we'll keep this train rolling. That's all I got for today.
Yeah, no, I think that's it. The easy way to say it is just that. So with that being said, we will wrap it up there for today. As always, do your own research. None of what we say is financial advice. We are not financial advisors, accountants, lawyers. This is for education and entertainment only. If you enter these markets, you do so at your own risk. And with that said,